Peace and salam. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. Muslim Network TV is always there 24/7 on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, as well as Apple TV. And you can always download our app on your iPhone and Android or watch us YouTube or Facebook. Just type Muslim Network TV. Our website, of course, is muslimnetwork.tv. So President Biden is focused on rescuing America. And something must be done, of course. Our offices are located in downtown Chicago. The heart of downtown Chicago is called Loop. Loop is the real where the main downtown of Chicago is. And that's where our offices are. Yesterday on our street, there was one person walking, while there are dozens, if not hundreds of people walking in that street normally. Our building next to us is a Hilton hotel, a historic Palmer House hotel, which is called Hilton nowadays. It's all shut down for almost 8 or 9 months. Across our street is Target. It's not Target for the sale purposes, it's the targets people who are developing products and things like that. Several stories, not a single employee was working there yesterday. And one restaurant among all the shutdown stores in downtown Chicago, which was open close to our office, normally has 200 plus people, has just 2 people there for lunch yesterday. So a whole lot is happening. Owner of our building himself has filed for bankruptcy, although still we're a tenant and paying our rent to them. So will President Biden's American Rescue Plan will bring Chicago downtown back to life? House definitely has approved 1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief package this Saturday. The bill does quite a bit to help people. It provides most American $1,400. It also, at least at this stage of the bill, supports $15 minimum wage. It extends unemployment benefit to all those people, which is about to expire in March, with additional $400 per week. Not only just extends it until August, but adds some money to it. It will send $350 billion to state and local government whose revenues have gone down because of the pandemic measures. It allocates $130 billion to help reopen schools and colleges. It also allocates $30 billion to help people who cannot pay their rents and to landlords who have suffered economic losses. None of that was fully supported by Republicans. 2 things Republicans did support, but at the end voted against the whole bill, was set aside $50 billion for small business assistance and $160 billion for vaccine development, distribution, and related needs. So here's what President Biden says welcoming it.
State Senate, where I hope we'll receive quick action. We have no time to waste. If we act now, decisively, quickly, and boldly, we can finally get ahead of this virus. We can finally get our economy moving again. And the people of this country have suffered far too much for too long. We need to relieve that suffering. The American Rescue Plan does just that. It relieves the suffering, and it's time to act.
So it passed purely on Democratic votes. Actually, 2 Democrats voted against it. No Republicans supported it, although President Biden is hoping and hopefully Senate will take up this week.
The days are too.
And only, so 100% American, I mean, Democrat, but two didn't vote for that. The question which I have in my mind is, will it bring life on the loop of Chicago back to life? I'm not quite sure about that. And I'm also not sure what does it mean to rescue America at this moment. It's the American Rescue Plan, but it will rescue some family, extend some unemployment benefit, and people who get $1,400, maybe just like what happened with the Robin Hood, a whole hundreds and thousands of people open up $1,200 account to bet on Wall Street. So what it's going to do to rescue America? And to discuss all of that is a professor who has a long view of history of economic development and who himself does a great deal of it, and that is Professor James Galbraith. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you very much, and it's good to be with you, Imam.
Right. Professor Galbraith is a professor at the University of Texas and chair in government and business relations. So do you welcome American Rescue Package?
I do welcome it. I think it has an important role to play. As the president said in the clip that you just used, it is the purpose is to relieve suffering or to forestall suffering that would be likely when unemployment benefits run out and when people start getting eviction notices and foreclosure notices and this kind of thing. That suffering was forestalled over the course of the last year by the CARES Act. And this is essentially buying another certain number of months of time and financial relief for American households, a little bit for state and local governments and other entities. So it's an important step. And I think it has the virtue of being large enough to do this job. It is not, it doesn't make the mistake that's been made in the past of trying to guess exactly how much you need, cutting it a little low, and then finding out that you can't get any more out of the Congress. So for first step, a very good thing. It is not, however, going to solve the problem that you just raised of bringing the American economy either back to what it was a year ago or moving forward into some new configuration that will return us to high levels of employment, economic activity, and general human welfare. That's going to take further major effort. And we get this thing done, we will just be at the starting gate. We will not be all that far along, in my view. It's the problem that you pointed out, just that people have really changed their life habits over the course of the last year to protect their health, and in some sense for other reasons as well. They've realized that they don't need to go into those offices nearly so much. We're doing now over electronic connections was a year ago habitually done by moving to a studio, and all kinds of things of that nature are going to require us to rethink how our society is organized, how the economy works, what people who have technical talents are actually doing. Will need to be restructured. What people who work in the services sector, how those firms survive, that also will need to be restructured. And I think the thinking of that about that is not even all that far advanced, and we will have to wait to see how things develop as this administration proceeds.
Professor, and this rescue package that President Biden is saying also will help the families. And will it start rebuilding the economy, or just it's a rescue in the true literal sense of the word?
Well, everybody has bills to pay. One of the features of the American economy is that a typical household has got a rental contract, it's got utility bills, it's got maybe tuition payments to make, it's got student debts and maybe healthcare debts, or maybe an automobile loan to pay off. All kinds of things before you get to even having a little extra money to go out to restaurants or to join a gym or take an evening out. And the pandemic was such a blow that it really threatened to bring the whole thing down in a way which would have been extremely difficult to repair, a real meltdown of all of these relationships. As I said, giving people checks gets you past that problem. It doesn't get you past all the other problems. Again, we're still just at the beginning of this.
Do you think President Biden has the team which understand the challenges which American economy faces today vis-a-vis, building itself to restore its position in the world?
That's a difficult question. Many of the people that I know of at the most senior levels are, in fact, veterans of the Obama administration, or sometimes even earlier Democratic administrations, and have a record of having essentially conventional views. In the second tier, you have younger people who I think have perhaps a broader vision at this point and are building toward a longer-term future. But the really important person in deciding what the team does is the president himself. And here we have, it's a little hard to interpret right now, but on the positive side, the president's been around for 50 years. And he knows there are not a whole lot more years. He's got to accomplish what he needs to accomplish. He's got to do in the next couple of years. And I think he sent a pretty strong signal that that's the case and that everybody is mobilized now to a very high degree of activity, which is very good. On the other hand, of course, he also has a history of compromising and perhaps letting some of the biggest objectives slip away. And that may be happening now on the minimum wage. We'll see. So I'm not entirely sure how things are going to turn out. But the fact that the president himself is not, has an enormous basis for making his own judgments and having learned political lessons about not compromising, not negotiating with yourself, not doing too little and expecting that you will get goodwill. Understanding that the midterm elections are very, that's going to be a test of whether the public has confidence in the administration or not. He understands all of that, and that's good. We've had presidents Democratic presidents who, in their first 2 years simply didn't deliver for the American people and got repudiated in the first midterms.
So you're more hopeful since he has been around, since he knows the alleys of White House, and he has started through those piles and piles of executive orders. He knows he has a little time. He need to better get it done. And so you have confidence in him. But do you think he thinks for himself or he relies on other people, which you're not sure about?
My impression, and I don't know President Biden personally, although I did work in the Senate when he was there, is that he does think for himself. I don't think you can really be a senator for as long as Joe Biden was a senator without developing a lot of information and knowledge and instinct about how the politics of these situations play out. And that was not so much the case for President Obama, who had only had a few years of elected experience and only a few years in the Senate before rising to the White House. Joe Biden is as much a veteran of the American politics as anybody can be.
You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking to Professor Galbraith, and we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with Professor James Galbraith. You describe Senator Warren's opinion about breaking up monopolies as quote unquote free market romance parading as populism, unquote. Do you think the President Biden has kept himself fairly independent of these type of traits?
Well, no. If you look at his record in the Senate, he had very close association with many of the corporate interests that backed elements of the Democratic Party over the course of his career. So this is a judgment that he has to make now about where the priorities are. Again, an advantage of being at the end of your political career and at the pinnacle of your power is that you don't have to be tied to the people who got you there because they have nothing more to deliver. And we have experience of that. And I'm holding out hope that will be the pattern we'll see from President Biden. I'm not, I can't be confident that that's the case, but as I say, it does happen that people who rise to the top, perhaps sometimes with the backing of interests that they don't feel particularly fond of, end up doing things that are quite different when they get to power. Lyndon Johnson was a case. Lyndon Johnson was, it rose to power in Texas with the backing of considerable parts of the white establishment of the oil industry and so forth. And when he became president, he showed his true colors, which were basically a Roosevelt New Dealer and the most forceful advocate for civil rights and racial equality that I think we've ever had in the presidency, certainly at a crucial moment. So that's the kind of model one hopes for when someone of Joe Biden's experience reaches the White House.
One of the whole lot of things are going to be defined how we deal with China, it seems, because we are the consumer of China. I mean, the camera, I'm coming to you. Most likely the laptop which you are using, definitely the monitor in front of me. I mean, we are purely a consumer nation at this moment. And, we cannot even have our faces covered with anything which is available because everything good which is available must come from there. And our manufacturing base has all shaken. So do you think President Biden understand what it will take to deal with China?
Well, I think the reality of the world situation is that China now has arrived as a leading economic power, and it needs to be that fact cannot be changed, needs to be accepted. There are overriding goals that the world community as a whole has to pursue, in particular relating to climate change, but also the preservation of the peace. And in doing that, we have to deal with the facts on the ground. And it's not only China, but also Russia and also Iran. But China, of course, is a much bigger economic entity than either of the other two. And so it is, I think, important that the two countries find a way to live together and respecting each other's sovereignty. And there are going to be tensions in that relationship. There's no question that there are issues that the United States will raise with respect to the Chinese. But at the end of the day, the spirit going forward has to be one that preserves the peace and advances cooperation on the crucial matters of common interest. That has been achieved in the past. We achieved it to a certain degree, even with the Soviet Union. We certainly achieved it with China in the earlier years of the U.S.-China relationship. and that should be the goal to return that going forward. Against that, you have an enormous amount of political pressure and an enormous amount of, in effect, the use of, let's say, nationalist rhetoric and inflammatory rhetoric to sharpen and political divisions and to achieve domestic political advantage. And that was an obstacle to détente in the Cold War era, and it's an obstacle now.
So that in that area, that type of rhetoric and language has departed from the White House, it seems, at this moment.
It's exceedingly hard to retreat from the very hard line that the previous administration established. Even if they wanted to, it's not clear that they do. But that is a feature of the situation, is that these things tend to ratchet up. And that's a dangerous situation, and it requires someone with a real vision and skill and diplomacy to change the tone. I mean, that what happened in 1971 when Henry Kissinger took his trip through Pakistan to meet Zhou Enlai in Beijing was a step that very few people would have had the nerve to take, but it was one that opened up enormous possibilities for the United States, including making it much easier to end the war in Vietnam than would otherwise have been the case. So there are, again, examples of moments when the tone can be changed and you can reach a constructive path forward. We're clearly, I don't see the sign of that happening now, but I would like to think that it's still possible and that we will not end up in a kind of spiral of escalating confrontation and also escalating diversion of resources, military resources, which is fundamentally an unproductive use of the scientific talent, of human talent, of the national resources and energies, which need to be used for other purposes as well.
So good tone is one thing, but were there some, if you look back, I mean, you being a professor of business relations as well, our business relations with China, do you think America went to sleep and allowed China to run whatever that relationship is? Because they develop $250 billion worth of surplus almost every year from America. And that gives them that power and strength to build all types of roads and belts around the world. Do you, thinking, how do you understand our relationship of last 20, 30 years towards China?
Well, I would put the turning point back at about 45 years, the middle 1970s, and say that even before China was a significant player in the trading environment with the United States, U.S. policy was to basically undermine the strength of the American industrial sector, which was located in your part of the country. It was located up in the Midwest.
Whole rusting steel belt of Chicago is just in my corner.
Exactly so. And I at the time was working for a congressman from Milwaukee. So that was another area where you had important engineering concerns and so forth that were very internationally oriented. And of course, all through Ohio and Michigan as well. And those states were hit very hard in the 1970s and the early 1980s by the policies of high interest rates and also by the rise of German and Japanese industry at the time, and what U.S. policy did through the 1980s and 1990s was to strongly favor the growth of the financial sector and the growth of the advanced technology sectors, which were located on the one side mainly on the East Coast, on the other side mainly on the West Coast. aeronautics, information technology, the entertainment industry, and leaving the industrial sector basically in the dust, basically leaving it in a state of decay. That state of decay ultimately led to the rise of Donald Trump. That's how we won the 2016 election, by turning 3 key states in that region. So all of that was basically the result of American policy. The original beneficiaries overseas were Germany, Japan, the Republic of Korea, and ultimately China. And China rose on the strength of really the effective management of its own development model. It did not do a big bang liberalization as the Soviet Union did, and therefore its economy did not collapse in the 1990s. It instead followed a path of gradualism, growing at relatively rapid rates, but changing basically one step at a time. It opened up and developed a massive amount of essentially what was originally light industry in the south of the country, which had not previously been industrialized. And it became increasingly, as time moved on, a player on world markets. So that developed into a relationship between China and America, but also China and the world. And as the technology has improved in China's ability to do sophisticated things has improved, then you see the development, for example, of the high-speed rail network in China, and ultimately of the Belt and Road, which is basically the export of advanced engineering skills that have been previously applied to internal development in China. Those two achievements they run in parallel, but one couldn't say that the Chinese achievement is because America permitted them to do something. America followed its own priorities. It basically devoted the policy swung in behind the financial sector, I think is probably the best way of saying that. And the Chinese and others took a path which preserved and promoted the manufacturing and the development of their engineering skills. And we now see which of those is capable of delivering a more rapid increase in the quality of life for most people. And it's clearly the second model, not the first.
So while reading your articles to prepare for this show, I don't find you much optimistic about America. I mean, I will quote something. It is a little longer quote. US President-elect Joe Biden's foreign policy advisors have been eager to convey that America is back and ready to resume leadership of the Western world. But Biden and his team may soon discover that a foundation of the past US leadership, a reputation for competence, has eroded beyond easy repair.
Yes.
Would you mind elaborating reputation for competence?
Well, this comes back to what I was just talking about. The American reputation for competence, which was built up in the Second World War and in the post-war period, was built upon the ability to, first of all, the very great productive capacity of our industry and of our organized workforce, and our ability to translate and integrate scientific achievements into gains in consumer goods and to provide those to the world. And that, as I say, that faded away after the 1960s, after the middle 1970s.
When you say competence, you're thinking of mostly the industrial competence. You're not thinking of all the innovative technologies which is coming around, which build the East Coast and the West Coast of the IT industry and rest of the things. So are you looking, can you say that, you are looking narrowly on the industrial competence, and industrial competence, so we compromise for the strength in other areas?
That's a fair point. There are areas in which the U.S. retains a world leading position, and they look at information technology. That's clearly one of them. That, however, is a very narrow base, or if you like, a thin pinnacle of economic activity. It's concentrated amongst a small number of firms. They're actually not very large. Their market capitalization is enormous, but the firms themselves are not that big. The number of people who are involved is really fairly small. It is not the basis of the broad American economy, which is largely basically now a services economy. And most of the people who have jobs in the United States are working they're working in retail, or they're working in various services activities, which have been hit very hard by the pandemic. While you're right, there are elements of that continue to be world dominant. The fact that a major one of them is finance is not terribly reassuring. The bankers don't have a kind of specialized competence that distinguishes them from bankers anywhere else. And they, of course, their business is not one which has an aspect which is predatory, an aspect which is easily subjected to corruption, and it's unstable, as we saw in the 2008 financial crisis. So again, when one looks at what the Asian countries, and not just China, are offering the world, they're offering a capacity to do things that the United States is not offering. That's why the Belt and Road is attractive to a lot of developing countries. They want to have ports, they want to have rail networks, they want to have 5G telecommunications, and their Chinese are coming and saying, we can do this for you. The Americans are not doing that. 50, 60 years ago, when I was a child in India, we were doing some of that, but it doesn't seem that we're doing very much of it now.
You're watching Muslim Network TV, and this is Imam Malik Mujahid talking with Professor James Galbraith about the future of American economy, and can we move from rescuing economy to rebuilding economy. We'll be right back after these messages.
My wife, she's a professor at the University of Cincinnati, who's Catholic, and by her watching and listening to our 3-year-old son watch Adam's World, she ended up taking Kalima Shahada. She embraced Islam because she learned so much about Islam and the other prophets. It really affected our life in a great way, and because of Sound Vision and Adam's World, we're Muslims.
I took my Shahada 15 years ago, and I actually am from a rural part of Ohio. And so I found the catalog for Sound Vision, and I ordered the tapes and the CDs and the books, and I used those, and especially for my little daughter, that's how we basically learned our Islam, and Islam entered our hearts through the wonderful works of Sound Vision.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, brother. I just want you to know that I love the Sound Vision website, that a lot of times when I'm looking for information, especially as it relates to homelessness, domestic violence, and women issues, I go to that website, and then I see what you've written, and then I copy and paste it and spread the word, because the wisdom is there. So I can't I can't do any better than what Sound Vision has already done.
Sound Vision is our survival guide. It is the organization that provides skills for Muslims how to survive and thrive in this community here in the U.S.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Anam, I'm in 11th grade, and I grew up with Adam's World, and what it taught me was unity, respect, and love for the Muslim Ummah.
Adam's World is the greatest show ever made. Take me to the Kaaba, man. I love that puppet.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with Professor James Galbraith. You identify 4 issues which trouble America. And I want you to dwell on each one of that what the current rescue plan does and what else need to be done. You mentioned 4 things: decades of military misadventure, financial debacle, pandemic, industrial decline. For pandemic, of course, that's the, I hope I can call it a easy one, that vaccines are there and the rescue packages are there. Anything else which could be done for the pandemic?
Well, we need a reconstructed public health service in the United States. It's obvious that our response to the pandemic was disorganized, it was slow, it was decentralized, and therefore it was uncoordinated. The voices coming from the federal government were, well, everybody heard them, and I don't need to get into that in detail. It was not a good performance. And so the countries which were able to move very quickly and which had the experience of dealing with pandemics, which had dealt with SARS and Ebola and others, were actually able to do a much better job earlier of containing the virus. That's a lesson for the future. Right now we're into vaccination and we will quell the pandemic eventually by that route. But we paid a huge price for not having an effective public health service. That's the main thing I would say about the pandemic at this point.
Industrial decline. I mean, we talked substantially about that. Is it possible that in certain area, America start rebuilding its industrial base? It seems that in your thoughts, industrial base is the good part of economy, which is on the side is checked by labor, as compared to living to the financial bankers and these people to be talking every day whether economy is doing good or bad.
Well, I think there are things that the United States can and should do going forward. I'm not in favor of a vision of a throwback to the industrial base that we had in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. It can't be reconstructed, and it shouldn't be because the world has moved on. But as we think about the specific challenges that the United States faces, and they include transforming our energy system, dealing with and mitigating climate change, rebuilding our infrastructure, making our cities far more livable than they are now. There are many things which are presently, where resources are presently misdirected. Let's just take a mundane one, the entire commercial construction sector, which until last year, if you wanted to do something, we're building a commercial office building of some kind or a retail center. Well, going forward, there are going to be a lot of empty commercial office buildings, not much construction. There are not going to be a lot of new retail malls because that's going over to a digital delivery model, and that's not going to return. And so those resources can be repurposed for some other purpose, like rebuilding urban transit systems and making making the energy networks functional. We just had an experience in Texas of showing just how completely dysfunctional the structure of our electricity grid has become under market deregulation scheme that was put in almost 20 years ago. And as a result, a lot of people have broken pipes and are repairing their homes as we speak. That kind of thing, there's a huge amount of restructuring that's needed. So there's industrial potential there, but using it requires new designs, imagination, requires the spirit of the New Deal, effectively. We say, okay, we're going to figure out what we need to do and set out to do it. And it's not going to necessarily be rooted in what we were doing 5 or 10, 15 years ago.
So you also talk about a third point, decades of military misadventures. Do you think America as a nation has learned anything from those misadventures of the last 20 years?
Well, the evidence for learning is not very strong, unfortunately. I do know that our military professionals are well aware of the limitations of what of the power that's entrusted to them. I know this because at the University of Texas we have quite a few people with experience in the national security sector and experience in the military, and many of them are friends of mine. And I was even once in 2004 invited out to address the Army's Fifth Corps leadership in Germany. Was getting ready to go back to Iraq. And some of the things I wrote about came directly from a talk I prepared for those officers, and they were not surprised to hear it, but they were happy to have someone who wasn't in the chain of command articulate these concerns. That we really, the whole model of essentially military projection of military power it is deeply fundamentally obsolete. It doesn't work in terms of intimidating other great powers, and we learned that in terms of remolding countries like Iraq or Afghanistan, that you can put a lot of blood and treasure into it and not end up with substantial results, because fundamentally we're no longer in an imperial or colonial age, and the circumstances have changed.
So if you think we haven't learned much, it means we'll do it again?
Well, a function, I suppose, of a professor is to keep trying to get a lesson across, get a message across. And this was something that, as you know, my father was engaged in the Vietnam period. There are things to be said, and one just keeps hoping that at the end of the day, realism and pragmatism will prevail amongst those who are making policy decisions. Against it, it's always the case that you have people who derive political advantage from provocative and aggressive posturing, and you have people who genuinely believe that we need to be throwing our weight around militarily. So it's a debate that we need to have. We need to keep pursuing, and at the end of the day, one hopes that the tide will turn.
You also mentioned as a fourth point, financial debacles. What do you mean by that?
Well, we went through the major one in 2007, 2009. The financial system, which is and has become in the last 50 years the central pinnacle of the American economy in terms of the distribution of income and wealth, and in terms of the distribution of power and the distribution of political power. Back, when I was a younger person, particularly when I was a teenager, there were important broadly based organizations in the United States, trade unions, the anti-war movement, the consumer movement, the women's movement, many things of that nature. And these days, we really have a political system that is dominated by financial titans and to some degree by the information technology titans who were created effectively by big finance. This is a very unstable system economically, and it's a very narrow distribution of power politically. And we need to, if we're going to have a democracy that's worthy of the name, we can't have a country that's being run effectively by the banking system. So that's, there's as I say, an economic aspect to this and a political aspect. Economically, things go along all right until they crash. And you sit there constantly in anticipation that someday the wealth that you think you have is going to be disappearing. That is not a stable way to run a democratic country.
So discussing these three variables of military adventurism, financial debacles, pandemic, and industrial decline, you couple of times bring up the phrase, the rise and decline of nations. And you seems to argue or conclude that that's what America is facing. So that requires substantial amount of thinking overall in the country, not just by one person sitting in a good position. Is America really discussing and debating? We're still an open society, right? Are we discussing what will make it, will turn it around? Are we, our think tanks, our academic institutions, are they engaged in a healthy debate which can reach to the level in which we can steer our way away from the decline?
Well, I think there are important challenges before we reach that point. And one of them is recognizing that the world has moved on even from what it was 4 or 5 years ago. It's certainly been a pattern of democratic administrations, of which this administration is certainly an ongoing example, to say, okay, great, now we're back in power and everybody just needs to line up behind the vision and leadership of the United States. And what they're going to discover is that while there may be still some lip service in that direction, this isn't going to happen. It's not going to happen amongst our allies, and it's certainly not going to happen with respect to the countries that we now consider to be adversaries. The Germans are not going to cancel the Nord Stream pipeline because we asked them to. The Japanese are not going to jeopardize their trading relations with China. Neither are the Koreans. Neither are any of the other people in this region. They have a big neighbor there, and they're not going to do favors simply that will jeopardize those relationships. We need to come to grips with this. We need to recognize that the Eurasian landmass is a single thing. It is being integrated economically, and we can live with that. That is a problem that will actually a development that will enhance the stability of that continent in a way which was not possible before, and will not destroy the relationship of the democracies with the United States, because we share values and political systems. And a realistic view is that we need to live in the world that is coming and not the world that we imagined we could create back in, let's say, 1991, 92, when the Soviet Union collapsed. A world in which there was a single world order dominated by the United States that set rules that everybody else followed. It didn't work out that way, and for reasons that are, I think, very understandable if you understand what happened in Russia, and if you understand how the Chinese have managed their affairs. It's not going to go. We're not going to get there. We need to live with the world that presently exists. We can, in my view, but it requires some rethinking and some serious and sober reevaluation.
What are the three things in which America is good at this moment, which we can build on for the future economy?
Well, first of all, I like the fact that we still have open discourse. We can argue these questions out and express our views. Secondly, I think that we maintain the best and most attractive and most interesting system of higher education in the world. We need to reverse the encroaching isolationism of that system, which has cost us quite a bit of talent. But that's a very strong point. Generally speaking, we're not a bad place for new kinds of economic and business development. There's plenty of potential, and We need to lay down the infrastructure. We need to make sure that people are secure enough, that is, they strengthen our social security systems, or give ourselves a proper system of health insurance, build up and renew our cities so that they become really attractive places to live and invest, rethink our energy and provision and deal with it, as I keep saying, with the climate challenge. Then I think the country finds its place in the world as a once again respected leader. But it's not going to be the kind of world that, again, that we imagine, or some people imagined 30 years ago, 60 years ago. That world's not going to return. The one going forward is up to us to create.
Well, at the end, I like you to draw your attention to one of the quote of your father, because some people describe you as progressive. And when I read you, I don't quite consider you progressive in the sense of the term which is used. But here's what, I mean, you seems a pretty good son of your father. Here's what he says. I react pragmatically. Where the market works, I'm for it. Where the government is necessary, I'm for it. I'm deeply suspicious of somebody who says I'm in favor of privatization, or I'm deeply in favor of public ownership. And he says, I'm in favor of whatever works in the particular case.
Well, that's very much the spirit that I like to operate in. My father grew up on a farm. His education was not theoretical. It was very much in terms of what worked, in terms of what increased yields, what kept your cows free of tuberculosis, what kept your barns from falling down. And all through his life, he carried with him this sort of root in practical knowledge. And that's a great advantage.
Are there many farmers who reach Harvard?
Not a whole lot these days. I think we did say that my father was the only professor with a degree in animal husbandry who was therefore qualified to exercise the ancient right of a Harvard professor to graze a cow on the Cambridge Common. But unfortunately, it wasn't any grass, so never exercised the right. But yeah, the spirit of pragmatism, I don't object to being called progressive by people who want to include me in that group. But it's not a religion. Yeah.
It seems pretty centrist in terms of you're not ideological. You're more centrist in that sense.
Yeah. I don't know where I sit on a spectrum, but I do think you got a certain training as an economist and as a practical policy person, and you keep your eye focused on the formulas that work. There's some principles involved there, but by and large, guided by keeping your eyes open and your ears open. That's not a bad way to proceed.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Galbraith. It's an honor to talk to you. Professor James Galbraith is a professor at the University of Texas and chair in the Government and Business Relations Department. Thank you so much. Truly.
It's been a pleasure, Imam, and a real pleasure to be with you.
Yes. And thank you, Sherdil Khan and Dr. Abdul Wahid, for producing today's show. And thank you for watching. You're watching Muslim Network TV. We're 24/7, so stay tuned for other programming. We are on Galaxy 19 satellite, covering USA, Canada, and Mexico, and also on Amazon Fire TV, Roku, Apple TV. And you can type Muslim Network TV on any app, download our app, or check that on YouTube or Facebook, or visit our website, muslimnetwork.tv. Peace. Salam.